One of the things I find interesting about Babylon 5 is the fact that they like to do things like take a very typical episode and graft significance onto it. What we have here is such a commonplace science fiction staple that you've probably seen this storyline a few dozen times before if you're any even remotely a science fiction fan. Alien inscrutable race captures multiples of another race to experiment on them. The original series did that more than once. TNG did that more than once, and so forth and so on. It's not uncommon, especially if you used to read the old pulp novels, to use an example. So, I have this theory, I've never been able to prove this, that what they did, especially in the early seasons, with regards to the show, is they would buy scripts, the same as most shows would do. And then they would take the scripts and the story ideas and add on things that make it part of the overall arc of the show. So even though the specific plot of this episode, oh my god, Sheridan's captured by aliens, doesn't really have anything to do with anything, this is nevertheless a significant episode. In fact, if I was to use Sci-Fi Debris' overall terminology, I would probably rate this a must-see. Not because it's a great episode, in fact, it's kind of... No, it's a pretty good episode. There's some good moments in this, but it's fairly average for Babylon 5. It's 0. Well, no, I'd say it's probably like a 4 or so on the negative 10 to 10 scale. But let's just go down the list here, which I happen to have right here. How many things of significance happen in this episode? First of all, we see that Kosh has some kind of connection and interest in Sheridan. We find out that Delenn, a lot of great stuff with regards to Delenn's character, and we see that Delenn's position has been completely compromised. We see Naroon, who we've met before, if you'll remember. He was back in Season 1. Naroon suddenly shows up and is now one of the members of the Great Council, and I'll be talking about that more later, but that's a pretty significant moment. And then there was the Haig's thing, General Haig, and what he's been going on with, which again I'll talk about later. All of these are very important, critical moments, actually, in the overall progression of the story. And they happen in the episode where Sheridan just happens to be captured by alien race we'll never hear from again. Spoiler alert. Seriously, the only time these guys are ever discussed again is in the fricking, the novelization stuff, which is questionably canon in this particular case. And, yeah, it's just interesting approach. I do actually like the approach. It's a good way to add new blood to a story, while at the same time ensuring that the main story keeps going. I might have to steal this idea in the future. Anyways, I feel really bad for Delenn in this episode. You can see very clearly Lanier is totally crushing on Delenn. I put it that way, though, because it's clear by the way they act. Credit to the actors involved. Delenn does not reciprocate. She obviously values Lanier. In fact, she considers him, honestly, I would say in the same general way that Londo has been looking at Veer, actually. You know, you are younger, but you are still someone who is valuable, someone who is wise beyond his years, someone who, you know, I care about and respect, you know, that kind of a thing. Okay, maybe care about and respect might be too big for Londo to Veer, but you get the idea. And I do like that. I do really feel bad for Delenn being a part of a race that, well, they're not exactly the peacekeepers from Farscape. They're kind of leaning in that direction. They do have a little bit of the whole eugenics thing going on, and they do have a freaking caste system. Really, the fact that they have a caste system alone says tremendous amounts about Minbari culture. I've talked about Minbari culture a lot through the course of the show so far, so I don't really feel the need to rehash it. But all of that is, once again, as usual, being carried forward. It's significant, because all that we've learned about Minbari culture in the past is now in the present and affecting things here. They literally look at her as if she is not Minbari. You could argue whether or not she is or not. That's up to your personal opinion. You know, whether she qualifies as a new person, whether, you know, the chemistry involved is changing her as an individual, if there's such a thing as a soul, if the soul is changed, blah, 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 blah. All of that's up to you. But it is absolutely undeniable that the Minbari do not consider her the same person, and that's the significance. So they fling her out of the Grey Council, and then they give the slot to a warrior caste. Apparently, Valen created the Grey Council of 9 amongst the 3 castes very much on purpose. 3 of each caste. Now that makes perfect sense. If you had 1 from each caste, there's a little bit too much of possibility of one person leaning one way or the other. But with 3, and with more than 3, with like 5 or 10, you have the possibility of simply too many people to get something done. The larger a organizational, governmental body is, the less likely it is possible for it to do anything. This is not opinion, this is fact. The more people you get, the harder it is for them to agree. Duh. I talked about the whole memory game thing. So, 3 of each. It's a good medium. Not too few, not too many. And it's balanced. Each caste has equal representation. And that has now changed. I don't think this is spoiling to say that that's huge. That is a major political restructuring of the way the Minbari work. They need to be careful with that, because that's basically tantamount to military coup. It's just being done quietly and through culture and tradition, as per the way the Minbari tend to work. I like how they actually flat out say the line, "What could possibly go wrong?" in this episode. I mean, really? A very, very small point. For those of you not aware, I forget the specifics, the physics and the biology of how this works, but red light is useful for when you're doing late night stuff with regards to space, right? Now, I know what you're saying. Why am I bringing it up? It's been a thing for a while now that several things with regard to the military craft, especially the fighters, have red lighting in them. It's just a nice touch. I just wanted to give compliments to it while it was there. Once again, I very much like General Haig. He's a very reasonable person. He's a lot more down to earth. He's a lot more personable, very charismatic. But here's the really important part. You remember how I just talked last episode about the whole idea of the obstructionist superior officer? The idiot general, the idiot admiral, right? How many times can you remember in science fiction, especially Star Trek in particular, can you remember a superior officer who made things better by actively helping rather than by making things worse? And yet General Haig not only is understanding and cooperative, but he's the one who brings the Agamemnon in, which, based on what we see, is probably the single biggest reason why they were actually able to save Sheridan and the Narn, whose name I don't remember, forgive me. I love that. I love that he's actually, in his own words, he doesn't say this, so this is paraphrasing, a patriot. He is someone who cares about Earth. Not the specific leaders of Earth, but the people of Earth, the concept of Earth, the Earth government as an ideal, rather than I am loyal to the president, for example. This is another topic that's been discussed in the past in a game called Metal Gear Solid 3, where this discussion of loyalty and what exactly you are loyal to matters. And it does. You could have 10 soldiers and each of them is loyal to Earth, but what that actually means to each of them varies. Haig lays it out here, and he claims that Sheridan has the same loyalty, and based on what we've seen, he's probably right on the money. Sheridan cares about Earth as in the people, as in the concepts, as in the overall structure, not individuals, not political parties, not doctrines, and not whatever is holding sway now. So I like that. I mentioned that the aliens never come back, and I want to talk about whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. Anyone here ever watched Star Trek The Next Generation? I'm sure none of you have ever heard of the most commonly known science fiction show in the history of all of reality. There's an episode in Season 1 called Conspiracy. It's actually the second part of an arc that went throughout Season 1 that was supposed to keep going in Season 2, and then the Borg came, and the Borg were better in every way. But regardless of that, the point is, as is, not counting the comics, the bluegills of Conspiracy are never brought up or mentioned again. What I want to ask is if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because it's obviously the way I phrased it makes it sound like a bad thing. Here's this big plot point, and then it's never followed through on. Or you could take it the other way. The mystery is never explained. One of the things I talked about back in the thing that made my show possible was that I felt the Reapers should not have been explained. They should have remained the inscrutable liars that they were. Because we know Sovereign lied many, many times, even just in Mass Effect 1, that's pretty clear. So, you know, I felt it would have added to their mystique if there was no big explanation behind what they were and why they were doing the things they were, right? Similar concept. What if maybe it's possible, and this is always a gamble, as to whether or not you want to explain your big mystery, or if you want to never explain it. Always leave that mystery here. These aliens are never actually fully elaborated upon, although they're, again, the book tries to, but questionable continuity. And the bluegills, again, not counting the comic books, see how this works, are never really elaborated on or carried forward either. It's not something... And so whether or not that adds to their appeal, to their mystique, to the episode itself, that's going to depend on the individual. It is a risky gamble in both directions, though. If you explain it, the explanation has to pay off properly. It has to be satisfying. And what's satisfying to one is not going to be satisfying to other. And some people don't want the explanation at all. But if you leave it dangling, some people are just going to be pissed off because they never knew why. And they're going to be left there sitting there struggling, going, well, what was the point? Why were they doing any of this? How does this matter? So both ways are going to fail for at least some audience members. These are diametrically opposed viewpoints. It's just food for thought. I wonder if they did that on purpose in this episode. I don't actually know. God. One of the things I want to ask, though. Naroon in this episode acts very angrily. I've decided I don't want to say what I was about to say. I do want to say this. Anyone ever watched Star Trek Deep Space Nine? This one's a little more unlikely. You know the character of Damar? That's who I think of when I think of Naroon. The parallels should be obvious to anyone who's actually seen both shows. For those of you who don't understand what I mean and are watching this with me, Naroon is obviously a recurring character. Same actor, we've already seen him before. He will be seen again, you know, kind of like the Barclay thing over in TNG. So I guess Damar is not actually the best example. But I use Damar because Damar started off as basically an extra with some lines. In fact, we didn't even get his name at first. But it was the same actor. And the actor in question was actually kind of upset about that. He's like, you know, I was signed up for a guest star gig, not an extra gig. And there is a difference, both in terms of pay and in terms of the work you actually do. He was getting paid guest star money, but he was acting like an extra. And he didn't like that. He wanted to do something with his role. Credit where credit is due. And he was told, just give us a while, okay? Same thing with Naroon. I don't know if the actor in question actually specifically went to them, but there was some concern about specifically bringing back the same guy and being like, well, why are we bringing this guy back? It could be any Minbari. No, we want it to be him. He'll come back later. But I bring all this up because he seems really angry in this episode. He actively spits at Delenn, but he does confirm one very, very important thing. He says, flat out, no denying it, if we had been told the truth, we would have just wiped out the humans. We would have never surrendered. For anybody wondering why the Minbari Grey Council had to lie to the military, think about that for a moment. That says a lot about the Minbari military caste, and it says a lot for the way the Minbari mindset works. They would have rather committed genocide against them than acknowledge the possibility of their own belief structure. Yeah. I'll talk a little bit more about Naroon when he comes up again. I like how once again Sheridan manages to connect with a Narn basically by being strong, by being a good warrior, by being a soldier, and by just generally putting on a strong face rather than just being like, oh, you know, trying to be diplomatic. You don't be diplomatic to a Narn generally. You be strong to a Narn, and they'll respect that. And Sheridan's pretty good at that. I don't have that many other notes to say. One of the things that I find interesting is that the Sprieg, or whatever they're called, the aliens of stupid in this episode, they space the captives. Why? No, really, why? From an in-universe perspective, it makes no sense because those captives were the only things that were keeping them alive. Literally. The moment they space those captives, the Agamemnon and the rest of the fleet just opens up and the ship is wiped out and they all die. The only possibility of them continuing forward if they wanted to be evil was to keep hostages. The only possibility of them going forward if they wanted to be more cooperative is to release the hostages and hope for the goodwill of the Minbari, which may or may not work. Spacing the captives only accomplishes one thing: spite. So the only logical reason to do that is if they are illogical. If they are not thinking the situation through and instead are presuming, oh, we're going to die anyway, so let's make sure that the prisoners die too. Because screw you is the reason. Because screw you, which is a very illogical reasoning. Now that may be very well why they did it, but that brings us to the other perspective of why doing this. The out-of-character perspective. As a writer, why have your alien do something so petty and spiteful? Why have any character do something petty and spiteful? There's usually two reasons to do that from a writing perspective. One is the obvious. These are the bad guys, and making them do something petty and spiteful, something that doesn't accomplish anything, something that literally is just, haha, I'm going to hurt you too, is a very quick way to show that these are the bad guys. There is a second reason to do that from a writer's perspective. Obfuscation. If you have a complicated situation the audience is perceiving, and then you have suddenly one person do something overtly, obviously evil, the audience is usually going to focus on that rather than whatever else is going on. So those are the two usual reasons for doing something like this, right? I'll go ahead and tell you, as someone who's watched the whole show, I don't think it's the second. So it's the former. Which, again, kind of goes back to my earlier part of maybe they were just buying scripts and grafting on plot points to them. Because this feels very basic writing. Very simple writing. And in fact, if you really, I hate to point this out, but if you really analyze Sheridan's time in the capture facility, there's actually at least 2 plot holes I caught while during that section. It feels very... I already used my best term. It feels very simple in terms of its writing structure, which is very much not Babylon 5. And it's such a weird contrast when you shift to the Delenn scenes, which have, some degree of complexity to them. And then you have the coda, which is Haig and Sheridan, and then Sheridan and the crew. Those scenes are brilliantly written and brilliantly performed. And it feels like it was written by someone else, because it was. But it was very heartfelt and very amazing and very tense, the final scenes. I do very, 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 very much like how one of the themes of Babylon 5 as a whole comes through in the final conversation between Sheridan and Haig. Looking beneath the surface. I've talked about this many, many times, and I've talked about this on this show. I have praised Garibaldi because repeatedly he will not look at the surface. He will look at the surface, and then he'll keep going. And I like that. That is B5 in a nutshell, if I were to be bold. In fact, I would say this is probably the biggest theme, the most concurrent theme throughout all of B5, looking beneath the surface to seeing how things really are, and adding context and adding significance under the surface so that you understand the full complexity and the full depth of what's happening. Maybe I'm biased because I believe that should be done with everything in real life, but, that's the whole foundation of my show, trying to look below the surface level of these things. But I bring it up in this specific instance. You might be like, well, what's the thing here in this case? Sheridan's service record. You look at Sheridan's service record, and at a glance, it looks like he's a hard-nosed military man who's going to be supportive of the Clark administration. And then you dig into it, and you see what Haig saw. So it's a nice little way to dovetail that in and really bring it forth. It's one of the reasons I keep bringing it up, because I want it to be fresh in your minds when it becomes significant for the plot, like right now. We've already seen this as well with Jakar, to use a great example, and Londo, both of them we have seen are much, much more than their surface appearances would lead you to think over the course of the last season and a half or so. Or season and a third, I guess. I also like, just real quick point here, right at the end, Sheridan gives his speech, and then Garibaldi says, I'm in. Like no hesitation. And then right after that, Franklin's like, yep. Of course they are. Garibaldi and Franklin are both very moral people. Garibaldi's already kind of leaning towards chaotic good, and Franklin is exceptionally chaotic good. Both of them doing what they believe to be morally right. Yeah, no, that's no question. Ivanova is the last one, but I don't think it's because she's any less loyal or thinks any less in that direction. Quite the contrary. I think Ivanova once again portrays that officer mentality, which I've talked about a little bit, and I sort of discussed in the last episode, Gropos. But Ivanova's not a grunt. She's a Navy woman. You know, she's an officer. And I bring that up because an officer is usually loyal to an individual, not the military as a whole. This is actually a very common thing in real life, too. So she's actually loyal to Sheridan. Very loyal to Sheridan, actually. Especially since she served under him before B5. I swear I didn't do that on purpose. Anyways, so you can see how she has clear reservations about this, but she's on Sheridan's side, and therefore she'll go through this because Sheridan is going through with this. That's all I got. Hope you have enjoyed. I'll see you next time.